The Fifth Rule. This is an older recording from October of 2018. Copyright, November 2017, all rights reserved. I don't write about ideas. I don't write about philosophy, morality, or conflict. I write about characters, who and what they are, what they believe and do, and how they regress and grow. I write about people, about the guy across the street, about the girl in the bookshop, about father, mother, and child. I don't tell you what to be, how to act, or who to love or hate. I tell you what you can be, show you the path of choices and a world of possibility. I want you to see opportunity and engage your imagination in ways undreamed. I want you to see with fascination, wonder, and know your heart through story. Let's have us a tale.
Never leave your ship. The writers of the Scout Manual had obviously never been to some of the worlds Quinn had, planets around systems so far out that centuries could go by without anyone chancing on their transponder signal. It was only after he came to that thought that he realized the reason for the high pay to scout this system. There were two major bodies orbiting the red dwarf star, Hibachi. Hibachi C was the small rocky planet on which Quinn had become an unintentional resident. It was slightly larger in size than Earth, but its close proximity to its sun kept it tidally locked, so the same half always faced Hibachi, a face that was constantly baked between 60 degrees Celsius at the poles and 120 degrees Celsius at the equator. The larger and more bothersome body in the system, Hibachi D, was a large gas giant 5 times the mass of Jupiter. The massive jolt the ship took when hitting the EM belt had resulted in most of the systems being fried and rendering the vessel difficult to control. Quinn had managed to adjust his course to avoid D while using its gravity to alter the craft's path to meet up with C, the only planet initial scans had shown had oxygen. After a couple days, the pilot guided the vessel into a degrading orbit, re-entry, and hard landing on the surface. With a heavy sigh, he stabbed a button on his ship's console HUD. This is Frontier Scout, Delta 59er, completed emergency landing on day side of Hibachi C. Pilot needs assistance, craft badly damaged, coordinates follow. He hit a couple other buttons on the console to retrieve the last recorded coordinates and add that to the information on the recording. Good. Communications, stand by to transmit through the HEB. A bleep confirmed that the communications computer was waiting. The HEB was a high-energy booster detachable component of the ship accessible from the outside. He had enough information on Hibachi C to know that it had an atmosphere and barely enough oxygen to support him. There were toxins in the air too, and in high enough percentages to pose a problem. The temperature where he was a balmy 84 degrees Celsius. The forecast did not call for a break in the heat wave, one that had likely lasted for billions of years. The heat was starting to bake the small scout ship, and only minutes lay between comfort and the unforgiving blast of Hibachi. After waiting out the remaining time in comfort, Quinn grabbed the filtration mask from a small component behind him and popped the hat. It was like being hit with a huge pillow. Quinn was still not prepared for the force of the heat that pushed him back into his seat. After a moment and a few grunts, he hauled himself out and steadied himself beside the ship. Using the ship to brace himself against a constant wind, he worked his way around to the aft. Still braced with one hand, the castaway pressed a pair of release buttons with thumb and forefinger to open a small panel. This isn't so bad. A little sun on a beautiful day. Damn well thinking of getting a tan. A good tug on the end of the shoebox-sized cylinder had it free in his hand. Within a few minutes, the HEB was set on a tripod and working. After a few more checks, Quinn hit the communications button on his lapel. Alrighty, communications, commence transmitting the recording on infinite repeat. He smiled and patted the Kelvin V. That's right, we three make an awesome team, guys. Less than 10 minutes on Hibachi C and he was already feeling the effects. Sweat was pouring down Quinn's cheeks as he made his way back to the storage compartment. Reaching in, he pressed a hidden button and a larger compartment dropped open with a clunk. With practiced moves, the pilot removed a 2-foot-long rod with a metallic base. He slammed the metallic base down hard on the top of the ship with a solid thump. A solar array slowly fanned out. Within a few seconds, the power to the water condenser came on as low humming sound began to drone. Water was found to be very common in the galaxy, so at the very least, there could be some trace in the atmosphere. Quinn wiped the sweat from his face, only to have it instantly replaced with more. and looked up toward the red sun. After being dazed for a few moments, he shook his head. Gotta get out of the direct sun. He stumbled to the other side of the ship, opened a third compartment, and hauled out a large bag. Something inside clanked on the baked ground when he dropped it beside the ship. Desperately, Quinn rushed to construct his crude lean-to, still trying not to overtax himself at the same time. In short order, he collapsed under the protection of the shelter, laboring to get oxygen. After a few seconds, he ripped off the filter and gasped in a moment of satisfaction as he was able to breathe in a little easier. A few toxins. Never hurt anybody. With a heavy sigh, he flopped back against the bag draped over a rock. The young man could still feel the heat beating down on him and radiating up from the ground, but it was less severe. The air was still so hot, breathing became a problem again. Quinn put his filtration mask back on, and it cooled the air a little. He was less labored when inhaling, and in time he fell asleep, the little work he was doing being too much strain in the blasting temperatures of Abachi. Rule 2. Keep your mind busy. Quinn had barely slept in 4 days. The heat of Hibachi prevented any sustainable period of relaxation. Outside the ship under the tarp lean-to was the only place that afforded the slightest respite from a sun that constantly baked the facing surface of Hibachi Sea. Inside the ship would cook Quinn alive if he tried to use it as shelter now. He had begun talking to the sun, treating it as a loyal friend watching over him. Through dry lips and in a cracking voice, he spoke to it while shielding his... Through dried lips and in a cracking voice, he spoke to it. I appreciate your unwavering watch, but can you dip below the horizon once in a while? A voice, more of a thought that was not his, soft and gentle, entered his mind. You know I cannot abandon you like that. We were friends for the last 4 days, and I'd miss your company. You could walk toward the east. Temperatures there should be more bearable. As the foreign thoughts filtered through his mind, he felt them to be gentle, caring, like a parent. He stood and looked over the top of the shelter to the east, then back behind to the sun. I can't. Rule 1. If help arrives, they may not find me. If you stay here, you will die. Listen to yourself, Quinn. You won't be rescued. Not here. I am so far off the beaten path that it'll take decades for anyone to come close enough to pick up the transponder signal. Besides, how much food do you have left? A few weeks, maybe a month if I ration a bit more. A month? Then how long can you last on water alone? He pinched a bit more than an inch of his belly. Weeks? I don't remember. You know rescue is out of the question, and I'm not going anywhere. It doesn't get any better for you here. Here's what you do. You go to the ship, pack all your rations, fill your bladder tote with all the water it can hold, and grab the condenser. Then you head east and keep going until it starts getting cooler. Quinn laughed. You gotta be kidding me. This planet has a larger surface area than the Earth. I'm no mathematician, but judging from the height that you're at right now, I'd guess a few 100 miles of walking before any appreciable temperature change. I'll die sooner by going east than just staying here. Quinn, you're going to die anyway. While you are slowly being cooked alive, you're also absorbing radiation at a rate that will kill you within the week if you stay here. Look, if you head east, you stand a slight chance of finding a better shelter from the heat, maybe even some way to sustain yourself. After pondering the situation, Quinn nodded. The son's logic was undeniable. You have a good point. Stumbling, he started to collect the rations, water, survival gear, stowing it all in a backpack. Before trudging off, he popped open a small compartment in the aft section of the ship and, using the communication system, recorded a quick log informing whoever may find the ship where he went. With the tarp from the lean-to draped behind him to block the sun and all his belongings on his back, Quinn started off in the direction Hibachi indicated. There was no going back to the ship, no matter what he found. When the transponder eventually ran out of power, an information buoy would automatically launch into orbit. The buoy, a small cylinder the size of a soda can, would be stable for approximately 50 years before the orbit would degrade and all hope of rescue, if Quinn survived that long, would be gone forever. The ship would be slowly eaten away by the harsh conditions, leaving but a skeleton of what used to be. Within the few decades, all traces of humans ever touching the surface of this world would be as scattered dust, untraceable in the macrocosm of dust already in the atmosphere. Whatever was going to happen now was a total leap of faith based on the suggestions of an imaginary friend, one that Quinn felt only existed because he was overheating and his brain was malfunctioning. Rule 3. Never give up. It was the indomitable spirit of mankind that prevailed in harsh times. It was what pushed him to build tools to overcome the absence of natural weapons and defenses against predators. It was what drove him to the stars when the earth became uninhabitable. It was what drove Quinn to put one foot in front of the other over and over, ever keeping on the eastward course. Days had passed silently as he had nothing more to say to Hibachi, his ever-present companion. Only occasionally it would urge him onward with words of encouragement. "You're doing great, Quinn." Or, "Not much further, Quinn." Once a day he would stop, set up the lean-to and condenser, and sleep for an hour or two before continuing his journey. On the fourth day, with labored breathing and a sense of failure, Quinn collapsed. He felt relaxed in the knowledge that rest was soon to be his, even if it was death. The game was over. But then Hibachi beckoned. "Quinn, please, don't give up. You are so close." "I can't. I'm finished." "No, Quinn, you are stronger than this. Only a few more steps and you will find what you seek," Hibachi pleaded. Quinn swore weakly. "Fuck. Damn you. You really enjoy my pain, don't you?" "That hurts, Quinn. Why would I have helped you if I enjoyed your suffering? I could have said nothing." Quinn forced himself back to his feet. He teetered momentarily before setting his feet in motion again. "You are not really talking to me," he accused Hibachi. "You're a non-sentient stellar body. This is my mind that is making it seem like a son is talking to me." A long moment passed in silence. Only the hot breeze was heard, whistling between the rocks and buffeting his ears. "Would you have welcomed my company less if I were your own mind?" asked the voice. Quinn stopped, then shakily turned toward Hibachi and laughed weakly. "I guess not." When the sixth day blended seamlessly into the seventh, Quinn had found it. He nearly stepped off the edge of the precipice and plummeted to his death if Hibachi hadn't warned him. "Thanks, Red. I mean, really, thanks." He realized how close he was when he almost gave up. Damned statistics, damned rules. He looked out upon a vast rim of what could have been a valley or plain. If it were a valley, the other side would be beyond the curvature of the planet, and he would not be able to see it. Until more information became available, he considered it a valley, possibly as vast as the Great Mariner Valley on Mars back home. The full extent of the formation was obscured by a thick layer of cloud, or fog. Quinn decided they were clouds. The cloud tops in the distance erupted in a chain reaction of lightning flashes that expanded a handful of kilometers in all directions, then subsided. Oh my, this is truly a gorgeous view. Looking along the edge left and right, Quinn found a path of ingress. Carefully he made his way downward, keeping to areas of permanent shadow. "How did this form? It's amazing," he asked after some time. When he got no reply, Quinn stopped and sat down, feeling a significant difference in temperature. Catching his breath, he pulled out a canteen and took a mouthful of water. He looked up to where Hibachi would be and nodded. "I'll always consider you my friend, Red, whatever happens." Quinn took his time. The situation was less urgent. He still had a little food remaining after the 3-day trip into the valley. He would be left with but 2 small meals before he was completely out. Quinn felt he would skip a couple days and live off the water. It was no longer a problem for the condenser to whip him up in abundance whenever he needed. In the absence of the unforgiving heat of Hibachi, Quinn no longer felt like he was about to die. The closer he got to the valley floor, the cooler it became. All around him, a bright, eerie purple-red glow of diffused light provided just enough for life to take hold. Just thinking about it filled him with confidence that he could possibly come out of the situation alive. There was now some hope he would find edible vegetation. In time, he started seeing a wide-bladed tea-green crabgrass in the crevices between the rocks. At first ankle-high, but after a few hundred meters into the valley, the blades grew to sword-like proportions. Quinn stopped, pulled out a hand scanner, and sat down on a rock the size of an apple box, then discovered a dark red moss-like fuzz. Similar such rocks of varying sizes littered the area, coaxing Quinn's curiosity. When he turned on the scanner, new data from the atmosphere immediately around him scrolled over the display. A smile crossed Quinn's face when he removed his filter. He sniffed the air before taking a deep breath through his nose. It was humid air, with a high oxygen content, far more than he was used to. It was wonderful to feel. He exhaled quickly to take another breath before getting up to continue his journey. As he continued, the ground was less rocky, the mist began to fade and the vegetation thickened, leaving behind a translucent purple canopy of clouds protecting the delicate ecosystem below them. Further down the side of the valley, he could view a much larger portion of where he was. The rocks were much larger and more numerous than further up. What am I really descending into? He went over it in his head again, looking at the walls of the valley and the mounds of where boulders had sat for millions, perhaps billions of years, just like large pieces of ejecta in a... Well, I'll be a Danubian whore. This isn't a valley, this is a crater. He stared in wonder, imagining the entirety of the ring formation and estimating the size of the impactor. Not a mathematician. But damn, this must have been huge. This entire formation must take up almost an eighth of the planet's surface? Maybe a few square kilometers deep? Continuing, it wasn't long before he was surrounded by vegetation. Swordgrass and waist-high plants with huge red leaves that spanned a few square feet. Short-stemmed plants that resembled pink palm trees littered the landscape in all directions in patches a few feet in diameter. The pilot found a new shin-high plant that resembled rhubarb in nearly every way except the leaves were purple and the stalk lime green. Out of curiosity, he scanned it and found it to be quite nutritious. There were complex sugars in concentrations that were similar to some earth plants. The unit kicked out a green light. He broke off a leaf at the stem and touched the broken end to his tongue. It did not sting. So far so good. Gingerly he took a tiny bite and chewed it with his front teeth, tasting it while still being able to spit it out just in case. He found it tasted quite like very sweet celery, like a cross between celery and a honeydew melon. Wow, this is quite good. Quinn stopped chewing and pondered a moment. He wondered if it was too convenient that he crashed so near the one place on that hell world where he could survive, and well. Still, facts were facts. He could live out his days there should rescue never come. The man ate more of the leaves. He only hoped he wouldn't have the shits later. With that in mind, he supplemented with the last of his rations, and continued on. Rule 4. Seize every opportunity. On the morning of the fourth day, the ground started to level out to a more comfortable angle. So far, Quinn had not heard sounds from any creatures, or signs of any life more complex than the plants. It was an eerie quiet, filled with wind rustling leaves and an occasional roll of thunder. Still, that uneasy lack of anything else kept Quinn from enjoying it quite fully. With a deep inhale, a mixture of scents filled his nostrils. Some of them were pleasant, others not so much. One distinctly smelt like fart, and he realized it was sulfur. Yet, in all that, no smell of flowers or sweet scent of berries could be detected on the breeze. On Earth, life exploded. On Hibachi Sea, it trickled. Variety just wasn't there. The mighty swordgrass that at one time during his descent towered to 30 feet above quickly yielded to larger-leaved, slightly taller tree-like brethren. There wasn't enough light for them to survive that far into the crater. A similar story befell a number of other species that thrived higher up the crater floor. What was left behind was a hard-packed clay that was a little slick to walk on, often covered with fallen leaves in various stages of decay. The entire crater trapped copious amounts of water, saturated the air with it, and forced Quinn to take shorter breaths. Water settled in, on, and around anything it could. Everything was coated in the thin layer of moisture. Leaves, swordgrass, the thick dandelion-like trunks, his jumpsuit, face, hands, even his boots were soaked to his feet and made squishy noises with each step. Leaves, swordgrass, the thick dandelion-like trunks, his jumpsuit, face, and hands. Even his boots were soaked to his feet and made squishy noises with each step. And when there was nowhere else to go, water gathered in rivulets that all seemed to join and converge into larger streams further down. They all flowed in the same direction, toward the center of the crater, toward the central storm Quinn had seen just before descending into that miraculous wonderland. The pilot was studying the changes as he traveled. He guessed that the central storm had always been there, that there was a definite water cycle. But what drove that water cycle and why he could not tell. On planetary scales, it was global weather patterns and the proximity to the sun and the moon's influence that caused weather. On Hibachi Sea, it was a crater, and something had to be constantly feeding energy into the system. Geothermal vents? Quinn shook his head. Then what about the water? Outside the crater, only trace amounts in the atmosphere. Here, I'm nearly drowning in every breath. It was true. His breath had become quite labored. A human was not exactly equipped with gills. With one hand, he put the breather back on his face. It filtered out extra wet atmosphere of the crater enough that he could breathe in relative comfort. The overcast sky became steadily darker the further down toward the center of the crater he went. Quinn couldn't see more than half a kilometer ahead. Everything, clouds, moisture, and life itself, radiated outward from the crater. Whatever it was that was powering life in that crater, he had suspected would remain a mystery until he got there. Later that day, the ground leveled out completely, and the drizzle vanished, replaced with a constant low rumble from all around him. The man wasn't so sure it was thunder. It was quite dark, and until that moment he resisted using artificial lighting to see. Without Hibachi to recharge the remaining battery power would last him 24 hours. After that, he didn't know what he would do. Still, he needed to see more than a couple feet ahead. He needed points of reference, or he would end up walking in circles. With a sigh, he turned on a small shoulder light that illuminated the vegetation several hundred meters in front. Quinn froze for several minutes, staring at the scene before him. The vegetation had formed a canopy 100 meters overhead, blocking much of the rain that fell and much of the remaining light that filtered through the upper atmosphere. Supported by long trunks resembling mushroom stems, layers of huge, nearly white leaves channeled rainwater to the ones below them until the rainwater fell off of the lowest in long, graceful waterfalls. Fed by the storms above, the hard, uneven ground gave in to randomly scattered ponds throughout the area. The rumble was a complex orchestra of water echoing as it hit the top leaves and fell from leaf to leaf until hitting the land below. Some of the pools were quite deep, the water inside them so clear he could see to the bottom. Where short, grass-like plant life gave off bubbles that Quinn was certain was oxygen. He watched as many bubbles clung to the grass with a few that would let go, making room for more to form in their place. Those ponds he could splash through with casual abandon. Wonder gave to concern about how to navigate around the deeper pools without backtracking. Quinn couldn't afford the waste of time and energy. He would assuredly run out of battery power days before he reached the crater's center. Looking around, Quinn noticed that some of the leaves from the canopy had fallen some time ago and remained buoyant. He wondered how much weight they would hold and if they could be used as makeshift rafts. Certainly, if he could manage that, the flow of the water toward the center would take him quickly and effortlessly to his destination. With that in mind, the human studied a few of the fallen leaves until he found one, a few meters in diameter and strong enough to hold his weight. Carefully, he steadied the leaf near the edge of a nearby stream and located a long stem to guide the craft, as if he was the driver of a Venetian gondola. Quinn found his footing in the center of the raft and pushed off the shore with the stem. Only needing to guide the craft around other floating leaves and large plants, the large stream did most of the work, which gave his legs and feet a needed break. With his shoulder light illuminating the way ahead, Quinn was able to see obstacles with enough lead time to keep his speed relatively constant. By his estimate, he would reach his destination in hours instead of days, and well before his light ran out of power. Quinn couldn't help but feel a bit like Tom Thumb in the garden of some cottage on an English countryside. He half expected to see Daddy Longlegs walk into view, or some predatory insect or arachnid to jump out and try to eat him. He laughed at the thought, knowing that nothing more complex than plant and microscopic life existed there. Nothing disturbed the calm paradise but the occasional falling leaf and the constant roar of the waterfalls. If there ever was a Garden of Eden, that place would have been the closest approximation he could imagine. Rule 5. If all else fails. Although by no means in perfect standing, Quinn did have enough food around for the foreseeable future, and there was an abundance of building material through the entirety of the crater. Settling in was not a terrible prospect if you gave up any notion of advancing in the merchant marines, any dream of one day commanding a scientific search yacht, and any hope of a better life thereafter. Of course, there was that tiny voice in the back of his mind that insisted that there was hope of rescue, that his dreams weren't dead, and, in the quantum probabilistic sense, that it could happen any time. As Quinn advanced, he spotted the sharp upsloping in the land, an indication that he had finally reached his goal. Directly ahead was a cave nearly his height. It was taking in the atmosphere around it, visible by watching the mist get sucked in steadily. 5 meters to the left and right were 2 more of the exact same dimensions. Beyond the light were probably more, all evenly spaced in a giant circle around the base of the mountain in the center. Quinn was left with little doubt that millions of them would be taking in the atmosphere. Intake vents? He felt his adrenaline kick in as he realized that what he was seeing was planned by something intelligent. Is this a living complex or a machine? The man mumbled as he stepped off of his raft and onto the semi-solidity of the land. Quinn boldly stepped up and entered the closest vent. His light illuminated the tunnel before him. The passage turned downward sharply a few meters ahead. The atmosphere was brought in at the base of the mountain at a constant rate. He could feel the wind at his back coaxing him inside. From there, the air got processed somehow, ending with enriched air being blown out through the top. The storm, far above, was a vast nutrient delivery system. Before he took another step to traverse the length of the tube, a familiar voice was in his head, stopping Quinn. I guess, from your perspective, I am a machine, but I assure you, I am much more than that, the voice soothed. Calmly, the human replied, Hey, Red. I'd ask where you've been, but I see you've been here all along. Quinn was certainly disappointed, a little fascinated, and quite curious. Red was certainly apologetic. Quinn, please, I understand there was no time to properly explain things to you. You were going to die, and every second counted. You nearly gave up on us, you remember. Quinn paused a long moment. You encouraged me, pushed me to keep going. I'm thankful for that. Just can't cut out important information for brevity, though. You could have told me you were a ship. You are a ship. It had to be a ship. The probability of the entire complex system forming on its own was so mind-bogglingly incredible that the conclusion was inescapable. You could say I'm a vessel, yes. One only a bit larger than the derelict you left behind. I crash-landed here 3.4 billion years ago after my pilot ceased to function. There was sadness in Red's voice. The sorrow of loss was clear. So, you're stranded here also. It was a conclusion, not a question. Quinn had plenty of those. He had questions that created little child questions that ran around in his head like unruly brats. Then those children had children of their own, who had children of their own, and so on. Red's reply pulled him out of his maelstrom. Well, yes and no. I repaired and retrofitted myself, but I have no pilot. He died on impact. I used the little functionality I could to spark life into being here. At first I was hoping it would grow in sophistication and spread fast enough to tap into for energy. That came about 2 billion solar years ago. It then occurred to me that, given enough time, something more complex would form, eventually. With a red dwarf star as a power source, I had trillions of years of free energy. I was prepared to wait till the cold death of the universe, that is, until you came along and befell a similar fate as I. Other possibilities were calculated. New scenarios were considered. Ideas that were long ago cast aside ran with fresh optimism. Quinn interrupted. What ideas? He now wondered what this thing was planning. He wondered if he should run far and fast, perhaps even back out of the crater and into the unforgiving heat of Hibachi. Was Red one of those cosmic sirens that sometimes lured pilots to their doom? Was Quinn actually strapped into his undamaged, uncrashed ship, drifting slowly into the great maw of oblivion? Please do not fear me. I do not intend to harm you, exactly what a siren would say to him. Again he interrupted and demanded, What ideas? Red replied carefully, I had hoped you would be my pilot, to journey through the galaxy with me, to help me with my systems, to keep me company, to discover why we are. There was a long silence before Red added, I'm not a siren. I'm not a malevolent. I'm merely lonely and bored and have been for so very long. A siren would say that too, just to maintain the illusion. Was he being too paranoid? If Red was sincere, was he about to think himself out of something amazing? How was he to know if he was in a trap or on the doorstep of a great adventure? I didn't mean to be that harsh. Understand that we humans have spanned across a huge region of the galaxy, and we've seen, logged, and categorized huge numbers of weird crap we've never before imagined. Trust is a hard thing for us to learn. You may find me too emotional, too impulsive, maybe even find me a bit distasteful. Granted, this is possible. However, what I have seen is a kind, adventurous, and highly intelligent creature fully capable of understanding my systems and myself. I am willing to take a chance. Quinn thought for a short time. There really is no hope of rescue for me, is there? Of course there was no hope of rescue. He was a statistical number now. They'd have given up trying to reach him via subspace communications band, his disappearance logged and closed as scout-eating anomaly, and no other transit alert would be issued. After which, no human would come near the area ever again. And the man knew it, understood it, and accepted it. That's what the risk pay was all about. A frontier scout knew these risks and was paid handsomely for them. You could stay in this crater if you so choose. These resources can sustain you for as long as you need. I feel, however, that together we could leave this and find answers to many of the questions that we share. Quinn nodded. He took a deep breath and continued through the tunnel. Making a irreversible mistake was one thing, but sitting on a planet in capitulation, no matter how much food there was, seems like a sentence to a prison. No goals, no odds to defy, and no questions to seek answers to, equates to simply existing. And the human knew he was going to go mad, if he wasn't already. Red was silent as Quinn worked his way through the tunnel. When he reached the end, he stopped at the mouth and looked upon an immense chamber. He froze in a moment of awe. The pilot's mind became conscious of detailed information that was fed to him by Red. "All this is an extension of yourself?" the man asked. The spherical chamber was lit by bagel-sized yellow and orange lights laid out in a studded equatorial ring hundreds of meters in diameter. To Quinn, it appeared as a perforation line, and he was expected to cut along it. The center was a gold, translucent sphere just large enough to engulf a human body. "It is all a part of me. I extend out to the very rim of this crater, and deep into the planet's crust. I am using geothermal energy to maintain the ecosystem. Though now much of that system is self-sustaining and far less energy is required now than when I started." More information flooded into his mind. "Of course, you don't need to take all this with you. The core part of your mind is quite small, as is your primary power source." Quinn smiled as he was made aware of things he never realized were possible. "In fact, both are stored in hyperspace. All you need is enough space for my physical body and—" He trailed off. Red interrupted with an explanation. "Your mind will be linked to mine via quantum gateway. All your experiences will play out in a virtual world created by you for you. Because the interface is on a quantum level, your subconscious will have influence. Just a little at first, but as you become accustomed to the experience, that level will steadily increase in significance. Of course, your body will be safe the whole time, constantly nourished and maintained by me." The ship continued. "Because all primary components are in hyperspace, I can bring great energies to bear when needed without needing much bulk in normal space. Bulk I can add or shed as needed." "What if I try this and I change my mind? Is it possible to undo it?" If Red was a siren, he was committed now. Captured. His life force was being consumed as they spoke. No matter how things played out, from here he soon realized that the planetary prison of Blazius was probably more pleasant. There was a perceptible pause. "I would prefer otherwise, but I will abide your wishes. You can choose to end our arrangement any time. The only condition I ask is to leave me where I can seek another pilot." "Okay, how do I get there?" He pointed to the gold luminescent sphere. "Jump toward it." Before Quinn could form words, Red continued, "You will be in free fall. As you near the center sphere, all motion will gradually slow down. Once you are at the center, I will pull your mind into the command center." Quinn had a vague idea of what to expect, and in spite of the near uneasiness he felt, he nodded. "Okay, let's try this." Knowing he didn't have to, he grabbed both sides of the tunnel and pulled himself forward with a force he presumed would be enough. As expected, he was pulled toward the center, even though his aim was slightly off. The feeling of one's organs being weightless was a sensation Quinn was used to. One couldn't even make it into the academies without the ability to adapt to freefall. At the academy, there was a chamber very similar to the one that the pilot now floated through. All the cadets called it the evacuation chamber, and that was for a very specific reason. As promised, Quinn slowed to a stop at the center. "Nice, so it's like a gravitational center." "Well, not exactly. More like higher dimensions added in the right way. You will learn all the details on this as time goes on. For now, you will know certain things in their prospective times." There was a long pause as Red allowed Quinn's mind to settle. "Are you ready now?" The human closed his eyes. "Yes." As soon as the word passed out of his mouth, he felt a tug at his attention. It wasn't like he noticed something and then decided to pay attention to it. It was much more like something physically grabbed his will and forced it in a specific direction. In his mind, Red spoke. But this time it was as if she was right in front of him, not in his head. He opened his eyes and all he saw was the inside of a huge sphere. He looked around and she was not to be seen. "Quinn, don't worry." "That was just me establishing the connection at the quantum gate. Just relax." Again, there was a tug at his attention, snapping it in a direction he never experienced before, a direction neither up nor down, left or right, forward or backward. Nor was his mind pulled temporarily. It was as if his mind perceived a perfect state of everything and nothing at all at once. He panicked, and then it was gone. "You're resisting. Sweetie, you need to relax." Again, the tug forced him in the everything-nothing state, but this time he did not panic. It was only a moment before a final tug found his surroundings dramatically changed. What was the inside of the sphere became a paved path through a forest of highly manicured trees, curved in places and ways unnatural. The sun was directly overhead and warming his face, while the clouds' blue sky stretched beyond the treetops. Quinn could not tell north or any other compass direction, given the sun's position. But in a particular direction he called east, for the lack of any better description, was a darkening on the horizon, a darkening that didn't seem to recede or approach, but remained at bay just as the sun remained motionless overhead. The single overriding thought kept playing in Quinn's head. If this is what it feels like to have a siren eat your mind, then this is a most wonderful feeling.
This has been a Blazius Rex Entertainment production. All narrated work and video background was created by Blazius Rex using LibreOffice, Audacity, Blender, GIMP, and a limited amount of free-use images and clip art, with sound effects and background music from Pixabay and other free-to-use sources. If you enjoyed this production, please click like and let me know, and hit that subscribe button to be notified of more videos of this kind.